Welcome back, warriors, where war never ends and sanity never lasts. Don't forget to hit subscribe, turn on notifications and brace yourselves, because from here on out, there is only war. Let's go. Yeah, that's right, you have eyes, you read the video title, let's cut right to the chase. I don't think 40k is that up as a setting. Now, for those of you who are a bit observing and haven't already started typing some real colorful comments for me, you'll notice the great big that in the title. 40k is pretty up. It's got rocket launcher grenade rifles as a standard weapon for one of its factions. The Necrons have that funny button that can accidentally start a cascade of supernovas across the galaxy and all that dark age of technology, stuff that only ever gets brought into play when someone wants to make a point about 40k. Being up. The setting is nuts, but I've gazed in the abyss of what's truly considered overpowered, and there's a lot of stuff that can beat it, a pretty good amount actually. I've thought about how to phrase it best, and I think I finally figured it out. 40k is like Orange Scene and SM from Dark Souls. If you want to get to the real big boys of a game, you got to get through them first, and if you want your franchise to be considered truly ball-busting the up, you got to get past the kind of crap 40k has in it. Please make all sorts of jokes about how 40k is the Dark Souls of Orange Scene and Smell, or whatever. It's a dead meme, and 40k is nothing if not welcoming to dead memes. So here's one more video to add to the pile of them I've made comparing other settings to 40k, something small and easy to end the year on. Yeah, for those of you with similar views to me, here's a video about nothing of particular importance. For those of you who make 40k your personality, I just have one question to ask, but can the Emperor beat Goku? Well, let's see how 40k stacks up against other universes. Alright, let's start listing off franchises. This will all be rather lighter specifics, by the way. The love I have for Halo, or obsession, if you're feeling less generous, isn't quite shared with everything else on this list. Let's start with a pretty common one. Overall, I'd say 40k wins. The tech is bigger and better, the scale is bigger, and a lot of the Psycheos in 40k could demolish the average Jedi or Sith. That being said, Star Wars has some stuff going for it. The higher-end estimates of the Confederacy plaque their military at several quadrillion battle droids. That's a lot of wrist rockets you got to worry about. So drowning out a few Crusade fleets, or Orcus and droids, is entirely feasible, and the amount of Force users in Star Wars that veer into being eldritch abominations is a lot higher than you might think. If you're not super familiar with the lore, there's Abeloth, which is just straight up an H.P. Lovecraft creature. There's Darth Nihilus, owner of the coolest mask in fiction. And there's a wound in the Force who eats planets for breakfast. And do you remember that time Anakin forced choke slam two gods in the Clone Wars? But despite this, the overall scale and relentless warmongering of 40k means Star Wars is going to go down when you compare it to 40k. See, we're easing into things with settings I think 40k can beat. You got to set the precedent, you know. That being said, I would take a clone trooper over the best guardsman any day of the week. Quite frankly, I could take a clone over a good deal of Space Marine chapters, Delta Squad with body case areas. Dead Space is real only here, because I think it's cool, but necromorphs are damn scary. Humanity itself, and the aliens in Dead Space, probably wouldn't be seeing much competition against Warhammer. The necromorphs, though, those could be a problem. Convergence events and the markers would play NY hell on humanity toe, and maybe even the orcs. And a necromorph infestation on the large end of things is going to play a lot like a Tyranid invasion. Only even more horrifying, imagine a Space Marine getting necromorph. That is an unstoppable monster. Granted, being an unstoppable horde of monsters isn't that special on 40k. I mean, there's plenty of those already. A proper Ted High fleet or some Orc warbands could probably take on the necromorphs. It'd be risky, and if the necromorphs win, they've got a new Brethren moon. But 4k also has plenty of ways to blow a planet straight to hell, so even the Brethren moons themselves are fair game here. Really, the Breathen moons and necromorphs are pretty fitting in with 40k. They're damn near unkillable, to the point that I think shooting off their limbs in Dead Space doesn't actually kill them. It just immobilizes them, shutting them down in a way. Of course, Isaac Clarke was in no way prepared to deal with them, and he managed it, so I'm sure someone like Gilman or Eldred could handle things. Another 40k win. But hey, if it's any constellation, Dead Space fans, I'd rather face most threats in 40k than I would a necromorph I can reason with, a toe at least, or at a stretch an orc. I can't reason with the ghost lady telling me to make a soul. This will probably be a proper video on its own eventually, since I've been getting more and more into Battletech as time goes on. That's for later, though. For now, I'll just say that on the grand scale, it's a pretty grim scenario for Battletech. In this matchup, it's centered around a couple thousand planets over roughly 500 light-year radius. That's the inner sphere where most of the cool stuff in the setting goes down. It contains all the great houses, what was once Star League, and it's just about all the damn clan of scum care about. Through sheer industry and scale alone, Battletech loses to 40k. But saying that on an individual level, I'd wager it's a much closer fight. Of course, even the mighty Atlas isn't going to be scaring up with a warlord tight end, but come down to the scale of knights, and now we're talking about a real fight. Well, true, I would argue that even the most fearsome assault mechs are only equal to knights, Battle mechs have a lot more in the way of versatility. A battlelink is a catch-all term for warfare platforms that can do any number of roles and also happen to walk on two legs. While there are numerous different kinds of Imperial Knights, you can safely assume they're in one of two categories. They're either going to shoot at you with can, or they're going to try and chop you up with big chainswords. Battle mech, meanwhile, could be scouts, artillery, massive platforms of light weaponry, and more, so might as well just be a big gun with legs, such as an urban mech pilot armed with a little more than his AC-20 and a very hateful attitude towards anything larger than 40 tons. Some have melee weapons because even in a setting as relatively grounded as Battletech, there are going to be some people who want to punch things with a giant robot. If you tell me you aren't one of them, I'm going to call you a liar. There's a lot more you can do with a battlelink than a knight or just about any of its non-imperial equivalents, and tell me that if nothing else the Lion Commonwealth wouldn't be pumping out Titan equivalents the moment they saw what 40k was bringing to the table. There would be people with bigger things in them. That is an insult that House Steiners simply cannot let stand. There's other, smaller but still important things as well. Battletech FTL is fairly reliable, although it is slow, and unless you're skilled enough to jump to pirate points closer to planets, fairly predictable. But hey, there's also no monsters you have to worry about eating your soul whenever you jump to FTL speeds. So overall, Battletech loses through scale, but on the individual level it's probably a lot more. Even if nothing else, even a light mech stopping on a Space Marine is going to get the job done. Not much you can do about several to 000 LB of military hardware introducing you to the dirt. But with that, we've given 40k 3 wins so far, so I think it's about time to fix that. Put MCU slop, or whatever abomination of filmmaking DC is putting out next, out of your mind. I'm mostly talking comics, at the worst, just as bad in their own way, but at least no one's been shoveling them down my throat for the last 15 years. Now, if you're thinking on the lower end of things, then yeah, these guys are getting bodied. What the hell is the Green Arrow going to do against the Space Marine? And if you're the kind of person who thinks Batman can prep time his way into fighting the Swarm Lord or Imatech, I hate you. Prep time is what Batman fans use when they know they're full of course I do the same thing whenever people bring up Halo in the Halo array, so maybe I shouldn't throw rocks in my comfy glass house. I'm talking about the higher end stuff of the comics, like the Lantern Corps. They protect the entire universe. They could absolutely deal with the people in the 40k universe. It takes some effort, and they definitely wouldn't come away from it cleanly, but they could get it done. Or, you know, Superman. What the hell is a bloodthirster going to do against the Man of Steel? He's basically incorruptible, and he's more or less a physical god. No one's touching him or the Flash, who's so fast to make Superman look like he's moving through syrup. And that's not even getting into the things like Galactus, who might as well be a Katon. There's all sorts of powerful beings in Marvel and DC that, at the higher end of things, make the 40k galaxy look pathetically weak. Sure, at the lower end of things 40k is going to stomp. I don't think Spider-Man can quit his way out of getting his head melted by Kairo's Fate Weaver, but that version of Superman where he sat in the sun for millions of years just absorbing more power, yeah, he's being anything the setting can throw at him. Or hell, Thanos, he cast Fingersnap. 40k is now half empty. God forbid there's any crossover beyond Marvel writing some Mario Calgar books, though I don't need half the Elder getting sapped away. They're starving as it is. In fact, in the spirit of superpowered beings bodying 40k, there's an account called the Drunken Guardsman on Twitter who did a couple of versus tweets about who would win, with one being 40k and the other being someone not from 4k. One of them was Sanguinius versus Oamin Man, and truth be told that was one of the inspirations for this video. Anyways, to answer that who would win question, I have my own question for you. What the hell is Sanguinius going to do when Oamin Man starts tossing capital shits at him from orbit? There's an argument to be made that maybe 40k could be its way into a win versus Marvel at DC's stronger characters. Morality in 40k is a funny joke. Maybe they can brutalize the other two settings into defeat. You're not doing that with Veets. They're a race of Supermans hellbent on conquest and don't view other races as being worth jack. They can obliterate entire planets over the course of a few days at most, and have their own vast empire to rival 40k, and while I don't think they're incorruptible in the sense of being immune to chaos, why the hell would any one of them fall to it? They have everything they need in view, non-Vilta mites as dirt. I've not read the comics, so I admit maybe I'm missing something, but I think chaos is on the chopping block as much as anyone else. You could argue they might fall to Khorne, and yeah, they might, or they'd see it as selling themselves off to a higher power, and tell Khorne to go kick bricks, with the exception of people like Magnus the Red at the very highest level of it. I don't think Psyche or powers are going to do anything either. Veets are at that level of physical power that just overwhelms anything else. An Elder Pyre or a Necron Cryptek can prepare whatever spell or incantation to rewrite the Vilm out of existence that they want. It doesn't matter if, in the time it takes to start casting the spell, Oamin Man can fly around the whole planet and rip their spine out from behind them, and even things like foresight that a lot of characters in 4K have wouldn't be of much help. Here's my reasoning for that. If you're tied to railroad tracks with no way out, you can safely assume a train is going to run you over eventually. You can't do anything about it, though, and while there's certainly not a lot of eats, there's enough that you can have a couple dozen of them on a single battlefield, if you absolutely must have that. What the hell is the god going to do about one of them, let alone a dozen? Hell, if you throw enough of them at the Emperor, he's probably going to get his rock too. I have an immediate confession to make. I only said enough of them as a peace offering. One of them is probably enough, but yeah, VT are might speed 40k stuff. I only included them in the video because I have the OMN man skin in Fortnite, so if you disagree I don't feel too passionately about it, but you know what I do feel passionately about, or really all of Dragon Ball, but Dragon Ball Z is what makes people sit up. You know what I've always found funny? Dragon Ball Z has some pretty fantastic FTL tech in it. I mean, Bowman Mr. Popo went to Jupiter in like what, 10 seconds? It takes like 43 minutes to do that. That alone makes it stronger than 40k in significant ways, but let's not kid ourselves. No one cares about Dragon Ball's FTL technology. You're here for angry people screaming and punching each other, and by God that's how Dragon Ball Z is going to kick the hell out of 40k. Now I think power scaling debates can be pretty wet back, even though I've now made 5 videos doing more or less that exact thing. I've never claimed I wasn't a hypocrite. I really don't care about discussing who would win in a fight, Goku or Gear 5 Luffy. It's obviously Goku, so who cares? That said, I've been a Dragon Ball fan since I was little, and you can't be a Dragon Ball fan without at least being passively aware that there are entire communities of people who sit down and try to figure out exactly how much stronger Goku is from the start of Dragon Ball compared to Super. So, in the spirit of the video and being the weeb trash I am, let's do some anime power scaling. Take a Cyberman. They have a power level of roughly 1 Ritz. That is, at half a Radit, Piccolo could blow up the moon, at like a quarter of a Ritz tops. Master Roshi blew up the moon at 15 Reddits. Vegeta could blow up the Earth to stop ripping off Dragon Ball Z. Bridged Frieza, at less than 1% of his power, destroyed the strongest warrior race in existence with a single finger, who themselves could take out entire planets worth of people as infants. What the hell is anyone in 40k short of? Maybe the god's going to do when the Scion drop pods start landing. To be fair, if any of the people in this video are going to do something like Fall Decay Chaos, it be the Sans, bloodthirsty maniacs, sound like the perfect thing for Korn, and I imagine at least a good chunk of them would probably embrace it wholeheartedly. Korn likes strong warriors and fighting. Sans like strong warriors and fighting. Can you imagine a Scion Demon Prince, to hell with the Prim Marks, Keton, aren't walking away from that fight? Maybe that's how the Silent King shattered them all. He ripped open a rift to Dragon Ball and grabbed a couple of sands to throw at the problem, and of course, named characters. Krillin is already obliterating anyone the setting can throw at him. Now you know what? I'm not taking the favoritism far enough. Well, I could probably do it by the Cell Saga at the latest, but let's highlight my favorite of them all, Vegeta. As a good way to know if I'm absolutely hammered, see if I'm excessively posting about Vegeta on Twitter. He's great, and he'd rip 40k apart if he felt like it, nothing stopping him, because at his level fighting is the kind of thing that can start shaking the universe apart, like Goku and Beerus almost did. Psychic powers, you might say, since that's the default for whenever 40k faces a threat. Sans have no defense against magic, and I guess that's fair. It's not like Vegeta's ever fought someone who's both overwhelmingly powerful and psychic. It's not like Vegeta's ever fought against someone who's magical in one way or another. It's not like Vegeta's been outright mind controlled, only for him to break free because he's so full of his own he just ignores the mind control. He's not just destroying the setting. I'm half convinced he'd become a full-blown Chaos God because of how big of an ego he has. All hail Vegeta, the Chaos God of pride and not knowing when to quit. Don't forget the Gods of Destruction or Xeno, who could just decide 40k has lost existing privileges. There's no fight, no Chaos Gods or Biggie holding off his power. He just waves his hand and no more universe for doesn't even meet Dragon Ball and racism. Until the end of Dragon Ball, Vegeta looked down on everyone who wasn't as Saiyan as dirt, looked down on Scions who weren't him as dirt, and looked down on Goku like he was dirt, covered in vomit. And of course, who can forget about Frieza? Frieza would make the Ealer uncomfortable with how often he calls someone a monkey. You can find compilations of Frieza saying monkey on YouTube. One of them is over 3 minutes long of racial slurs. Frieza is the best villain, truly, but yeah, Dragon Ball stomps. I made a community post about this a while ago because I decided that, yeah, I should make a Dragon Ball 40k video. I don't know why I thought that was a good idea, but I did, so here's the abridged version, since it's about the most I can make without it being a pretty shite video even by my standards. God, I'm the cleverest man around, aren't I? Get it? The abridged version, cause Dragon Ball Z abridged. Get it? Do you get the funny joke? I'm moving on now. No more anime is a main topic, I tentatively promise now. For this one you may be a bit confused. Steris isn't really a setting with defined factions and whatnot. I mean, there's the preset empires, and they use the Commonwealth of Man for the trailer that introduced planet killers, but nothing beyond that. But look deeper at the things you can find in Stellaris, and it's a sort of thing that would make the Necrons afraid. The endgame tech is the stuff of nightmares. The machine ascension is just straight up neutron byte transference. The end of the cycle is the fall of the Eldar. If instead of just creating the Eye of Terror, it created an Eye of Terror that moved around the galaxy and hunted everyone down, the war inhabitants. Taris isn't some mythical background event. It's two colossally powerful empires unleashing weapons that can crack planets in half at a whim, and that's not even getting into the to become the crisis path, where your civilization doesn't just reach a point of eclipsing the Eldar or Thousand Suns as Psycheers, they become a race of chaos gods. Even before that, there's plenty of powerful things you can do, and with mods it gets even more ballistic, turning entire moons into weapons platforms, quadruple layer ring worlds around your stars, Dyson spheres across the Empire. You can create stars-spanning nations that dwarf 40k and always possible. And while I'm not going to pretend that half the stuff in it isn't inspired by 40k, and by inspired I mean ripped off, it also takes it all to a new level. You know the Prane, hey the not Tyranids. Unlike the Tyranids who are ever only hinted and most to be running from something, the Prine are running from something that caused the galaxy to dim and then fade as your scientist watched it. And to top it off, the atrocities you can commit in Stellaris even eclipse 40k. Sure, you can do the classic kill all aliens thing and recreate the Imperium of Man for the 1000th time, no judgment here, every Stellaris player has done it. The game encourages you to be a monster, not just because of the buffs but because it means the end game won't be running at 10 frames a second because there's just too many different empires in the galaxy, but the things people have done in that game. My god, my favorite is a guy who enslaved part of an empire, turned the citizens into food, and then set up a trade agreement with the former empire to give them food. That mad bastard turned a species into snacks and then sold them back to their fellows. Pay attention, Black Library writers, that's how you write a war crime. Now, this is one hell of a setting. Here's the thing that inspired the video even more than the Oemin Man vs. Anguinus tweet. For those of you who've never heard of it, the Zayli sequence of books is a science fiction series written by Stephen Baxter. I have yet to read it fully, but it's more of a setting-driven series and a character one, to my knowledge. The people in it are vessels for the universe at large. It is also, to my understanding, one of if not the single most overpowered setting in all of science fiction. Let's take the Int-Erin Coalition of Governance, or IAG for short. The IAG is a brutal dictatorship that makes the Imperium look cuddly and friendly. I'm not just talking xenophobia. I'm talking sending trillions of child soldiers to die against aliens because it's easier to do than building robots or something of that sort, and who can forget skinning aliens, known as silver ghosts, alive, being considered a family-friendly activity before the concept of family was done away with in favor of more child soldiers. And they're not poorly equipped by any means. They have me-like weapons that can kill thousands in a single second. Their equivalent of an assault rifle is a gut weapon. If you're anything like me, you might wonder what gut means. To simplify it, take the Big Bang, the event that started our universe, and now turn it into a gun. The IO can throw stars at you, and their war against the Zayli. They threw so much at the galactic core that the entire thing glowed bright pink. They changed the color of the galaxy because of how violently they were fighting. They have time travel weaponized to the point that they use it to police their empire. If you commit a treasonous act, they don't just kill you. They torture you, kill you, then go back in time and do it to your past self, who doesn't even know what the hell you were going to do. They're militaries in numbers far beyond the Imperial Guard. That makes the old ones look like children, and they have eliminated all non-human life in at least one galaxy, so I bet you're thinking that, damn, the IAG really is like the Imperium of Man, but even crazier, I bet they're the masters of their setting too, right? Not even close. From the admittance of a member of it, they aren't the destined rulers of all reality, even with all of their tech. He outright compares mankind to vermin spreading across the stars and multiplying a defiance of those who they know are their betters in every way possible. Let's start with the Transcendence. The Transcendence is humanity from the far, far, far future. What exactly they are is hard to define because, unlike most of the time with this sort of thing, the Transcendents are a race that is actually transcendent. They are to us what we are to ants, and trying to understand them is an exercise in futility. They wanted to create a utopia free of suffering for mankind. Problem is, they couldn't do that. If there was any suffering, because they were every human merged into one, but also not, but also yes. If anyone in any timeline was feeling suffering, they were suffering and were weakened for it. Their way of eliminating human suffering was to fold every single timeline into one, and if they couldn't eliminate suffering through this, they would end humanity so it could be free of suffering. Let me clarify that for you, because fold every time into one sounds like a lot of nothing. Raise your hand for me and open and close it. There's a timeline where I told you to snap your fingers. Instead, there's a timeline where I said clap your hands. Those are the only events that are in any way different between those two timelines. This sentence, everything before and after it, and all the history of the world and universe at large are still the same. The Transcendents wanted to forcibly merge every single variation of that choice, and every single other timeline created by different choices and events in history, into one. They had the capability to do it, They were gods. They were, to put it lightly, transcendent. They could turn you into a mathematical equation, and for to watch the universe die of premature heat death because you, in particular, pissed them off. Of course, even describing the transcendent as pissed off is tricky because emotions, as we understand them, just don't fit the bill. And even they were nothing in the end because, to repeat myself, the Zali were to them what the transcendence was to us, what we are to ants, with one singular practical exception. The Zel are unstoppable. Entire galactic superclusters are construction material to them. The transcendent were tryhard, stepping out of their league and were stumped back into the Stone Age along with the rest of humanity by the Zali. They have existed since the moment the universe formed after the Big Bang, and when that wasn't enough for their plans, they built an AI called the Anti-Zali that would go back in time to give them a billion-year head start on civilization building. The stuff their constructs are made out of, rather unimaginably called Zali construction material, is 100% energy efficient, with absorption, as in the energy of anything you shoot them with is completely absorbed and ignored, no matter how powerful. To them, a supermassive black hole in the surrounding galaxy isn't a new place to conquer or explore and colonize, it's a computer. The 20,000-year war the Ayeg waged against them ended with the Zali leaving the galaxy, not because mankind truly won, but because the Zali were sick of humanity's crap and left them to their fate. For a good chunk of the war, the Zali just ignored humanity because mankind was that far beneath them. And by the way, when I say the Zali, I don't mean the race of the Zali, I mean the Zali singular, who was in the Milky Way galaxy. They used entire galaxies to construct a ring, millions of light years across, that would send them to entirely different realities. Their weapons could bisect entire galaxies, and their leftover junk was a sort of thing that catapulted lesser species into a golden age. They were the undisputed masters of bionic matter. Your house, your school, your place of work, if it can be considered a thing, the Zali can rework it and the laws of physics that make it possible to suit their needs. And what you might consider a bit of a twist, they were ultimately benevolent. Their ring wasn't a weapon. It was an escape route, because the only thing capable of beating the masters of matter were the masters of dark matter, the Fatino birds. All you need to know about them is that the Z were fighting a war against them and losing badly. The birds were introducing premature heat death into the entire universe for the sole reason of making reality more comfortable to them. The Z time traveled back to the beginning of existence itself to get themselves a head start because otherwise they couldn't save anyone from a universe that would die billions of years early, and it's at least partially implied that the birds weren't even aware they were fighting a war against the Z. The setting isn't going to win against 40k, this setting isn't going to realize it, and 40k are in a war. You know what the kicker is? This setting, with all of its technique, could rewrite 40k out of existence with time-traveling AI, rewriting of the laws of physics, and objects that can take the force of the Big Bang and not even notice. It's hard sci-fi. The biggest scientific inaccuracies within the Zali sequence aren't because that's not how reality works, they're because our understanding of science is advanced. Since the books were written, their time travel works because of general relativity and how approaching light speed warps time and space around you, changing universal conet like the Silver Ghost do, who, by the way, aren't even particularly powerful within the setting, would result in AI with infinite computation power that can give you the answer to your question before you ask it. In theory, almost everything in these books is, or was, considered fully possible to one degree or another. Have fun with that thought. A few other things popped in my head that I couldn't think of enough words to make entire segments out of but wanted to mention them regardless. For starters, I lied about there being no more anime because G and Logit is up first. Explain to me how 40k is going to fight this thing off. You can't. Grim Dark only wore your way into beating it. Simone has decided he is manlier than you are, so you lost? Must I? I don't make the rules, it just happens. Doom also wins pretty handily, I'd wager. I don't mean the demons or makers, I mean the Doom Slayer, that's all that's needed. If you drop the Doom Slayer into the Great Rift, within weeks there is no more Great Rift, and everyone else would be too terrified of the guy to do anything about him, except Malum. Maybe they'd probably be good friends. An individual being from Age of Cigar could probably do pretty well in 40k. This is another one of those things that would probably be worth its own video, but in brief, the gods and the mortal elms would do just fine. If nothing else, Nash would very probably become ascendant in a way like never before because there was a whole lot of death going around. Tyrion and Tease could revitalize the Eldar if, for no other reason than the elves in the fantasy side of Warhammer are infinitely more competent than their 40k cousins, and if you drop the Great Horned Rat into 40k, he probably wouldn't even realize he's in the wrong setting. He just set about making Hive World somehow even worse to live on than they already are. Oh, and Gotri would murder anything that tries to get in his way, still doesn't matter what he's looking for. Felix, and by God, if he has to slaughter demon Primmarchs to find him, then that's just what he's going to do. And really, I think that sums about everything up. I mean, I can keep going with settings, sure, but I wanted a nice variety for the video of can't beat 40k, and can beat 40k, and I think I got that. So you may ask, what was the point of this? Well, there's actually two takeaways here. If I put all of this under a guise of matching settings up against Warhammer, I get to talk about things I like without it sinking my channel's analytics. You've all been fooled by my master scheme, get on zoned, but also, who really cares how up a setting is? Does it really matter if some schmuck from another setting can beat the Emperor? Enjoy the setting for the wild and wacky stuff. If you can find any, you can't quite find anywhere else. I just think it's cool to imagine things like Nye houses going against assault lances while the Primarch and, in Captain America, duke it out in the foreground. It's silly, it's got the same energy as smashing two different action figures together as a kid, and in my mind that's the ideal way to view 40k, not as the narrative version of a dick measuring contest. And that's it. You've survived yet another video of mine. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to drop a like, subscribe, and leave a comment to let me know what you think, or just rant about some filthy Xenos, that works too. Thank you, as always, to my wonderful channel members. You are the overpowered piece of technology to my Warhammer fan, letting me shout into the internet about nothing of particular importance. If you'd like to support the channel, feel free to subscribe or become a member. Either way, thank you for watching. Have a Merry Christmas and take care out there.